My parents always treated me like trash and called me ungrateful for not helping fund my sister's lavish wedding. So I cut contact and watched them regret it. I'm 28 years old, and if I'm being honest, my family has always treated me like the backup plan. If Laura, my younger sister, wanted something, she got it. Whatever she needed, my parents somehow made it happen. For me, though, I was supposed to suck it up, deal with things on my own, and make sacrifices whenever they needed me to. I'd been doing it for so long. I didn't realize how ridiculous it all was until they asked me to pay for her luxury wedding. That's when I finally had enough and cut them off. Now they're regretting it, and for once, I'm free from their demands. But it took years of family obligations, blatant favoritism, and ridiculous expectations to get me to this point. This is the story of why I finally said no. When I was a kid, I thought every family was like mine. Laura got her way, always. Whether it was the latest gadget, new clothes, or the best birthday parties, she had it. I can't remember a single time they said no to her, even if it meant making sacrifices on my end. Like when I was 14 and wanted to play soccer. My parents shut it down, saying it was too expensive, and told me I could help out around the house instead. I'd shrugged it off, but then, a year later, Laura wanted to join dance classes. Not only did they sign her up, but they also bought her custom dance shoes and took her to every single practice. I didn't say anything. I was used to it by then. I'd learned that in my family, Laura's happiness was everyone's responsibility, and my wants didn't really matter. Birthdays were another story. Every year, Laura had a full-on celebration with family, friends, and a big cake. But for my birthdays? Once I turned 13, it was a few relatives, a small cake, and the understanding that it was just too much to throw a big party. The year I turned 13 was especially brutal because they canceled my small party altogether to take Laura to an amusement park, since she really wanted to go. Apparently, my birthday was no big deal compared to Laura's sudden need for roller coasters. When I started working at 15, I thought I'd finally have something of my own. I saved up for a bike, hoping to get a bit of freedom. But one day, my savings just disappeared. Turns out, my parents had borrowed it for Laura's dance competition fees. When I asked if I'd get it back, they said, "It's family money. You're doing this for your sister." That was my first real lesson. In our family, anything I had was basically Laura's. This kept happening through high school. Whenever I had any savings, my parents had some reason to dip into it. Laura's new phone, her music lessons, her school trips, it didn't matter. They had no shame in taking from me to fund her life. When I complained, they told me I was selfish and didn't understand family sacrifice. In high school, I did well academically, partly because it was the only thing I could control. I figured if I was good enough, I could maybe get a scholarship and move out as soon as possible. But of course, that didn't go unnoticed. My parents decided that my gifted status made me responsible for tutoring Laura in every subject she struggled with, which, to be honest, was all of them. I'd be up late studying for my own exams, but they'd insist I take a few hours to help her first. When I pushed back, they'd tell me I was letting her down and not being a good brother. It wasn't like she even cared about the subjects. I was just supposed to make sure she passed, so she wouldn't have to worry about grades. By the time I graduated, I was so ready to leave, I'd practically sprinted out the door. I got into a decent college with some scholarships and moved away. I thought that was the end of being treated like Laura's backup plan. But even after I left, they kept trying to drag me back in. When I left for college, I thought I'd get a bit of freedom. But my parents just shifted their demands. They'd call me, asking if I could send a bit of money just to help out, since Laura was starting to drive and needed gas money or whatever else. I was taking out loans for my own expenses, but they didn't seem to care. Every time I'd say I couldn't help, they'd pull the family helps family card. After college, I landed a job in tech and finally started saving. I got an apartment and began building my own life. But my parents didn't let up. They'd still call, asking me to chip in for whatever new thing Laura wanted. My mom even mentioned that I should think about getting a bigger place, in case Laura ever needs to stay over. I brushed it off, thinking it was a joke, but she was dead serious. They really thought my life should be arranged around Laura's possible needs. The worst part, Laura wasn't even grateful. She just expected it. One time, I gave her a small amount to help her with rent, and she didn't even say thank you. Instead, she complained that it wasn't enough. It became clear that as far as my family was concerned, I was just an ATM with no feelings or needs of my own. Then came the wedding. Laura got engaged last year to some trust fund kid named Ethan. He was loaded, so I figured for once I wouldn't be asked to contribute. But I should have known better. My parents invited me over for a family discussion about wedding plans. Right away, my mom launched into this speech about how Laura deserved the best for her special day. They wanted it to be a fairy tale wedding. Think venue, custom decor, designer dress, the whole 9 yards. Then they hit me with it. They expected me to chip in a large chunk of my savings. I almost laughed. I pointed out that I was saving for my own future and didn't have thousands lying around to throw at Laura's wedding. My mom's response? You're doing well. You should want to help your sister have her dream day. When I told them I couldn't afford it, she threw a fit, saying I was selfish and ungrateful after everything they'd done for me. Done for me? They hadn't even supported me through college. I was paying off my own student loans while they spent money on vacations and gifts for Laura. I told them I was tired of being used and that I wasn't going to fund Laura's wedding. They were stunned, but I didn't care. I walked out and went home. The guilt tripping started the next day. My mom left voicemails talking about family loyalty and how I was tearing the family apart over a bit of money. My dad sent texts reminding me of their sacrifices to raise us both. I asked them where this family loyalty was when they took my savings for Laura's dance classes or expected me to tutor her for hours. They didn't have a real answer, just kept going with the guilt. Then they tried bringing an extended family. My aunt called, saying I should do the right thing and make sure my sister had her special day. My cousin even messaged me, saying it was just money and that I'd regret letting it ruin our family. I was done listening. I ignored every call, every message, and blocked numbers left and right. Meanwhile, Laura took it to a whole new level. She sent me this long message saying she was so disappointed in me for not supporting her happiness. She ended it with, I guess I shouldn't expect much from someone who's always been jealous of me. That one stung, not because it was true, but because I realized that she genuinely thought I owed her my entire life, and any refusal was just jealousy. That's when I knew I was done. I blocked her too. A few days later, my parents hit me with another bombshell. They planned to use the small emergency fund they'd set aside for me. This fund was supposedly for both me and Laura, but now they'd decided it was fair game for her wedding. They told me, since you're being difficult, we'll just use it for Laura. I told them if they touched that money, we were done. They tried to argue, saying it was their money anyway, that they'd raised us both and deserved to decide how it was spent. I told them that if they went through with this, they shouldn't expect any help from me down the line. They called me heartless, saying I'd abandoned the family, but I didn't care anymore. They didn't listen, of course. I heard through a mutual family friend that they'd gone ahead and drained that fund for Laura's wedding. I was furious, but at the same time, it confirmed everything I'd known deep down. They would always put Laura first, no matter what promises they'd made to me or how it impacted my future. They wanted me to clean up the mess, and when I wouldn't, they just took from me anyway. Despite all the guilt tripping and begging, I still wasn't invited to the wedding. Apparently, I wasn't family enough to attend if I wasn't willing to pay for it. My mom sent one final dramatic message before the wedding, saying that I'd ruined their perfect day and that they didn't want me there sulking and spreading negativity. I didn't respond. I figured I'd been generous enough. Taking myself out of their little fairy tale was the least I could do. Instead, I spent that weekend with friends, finally enjoying some peace. I blocked every number I could, ignored the messages from relatives who tried to rope me back in, and let myself breathe for the first time in months. And you know what? I didn't miss being there at all. I was done bending over backward to be part of a family that only wanted me around when I was convenient. A few months went by, and I heard bits and pieces through family friends and mutual contacts. The wedding had been as over-the-top as expected, and they'd spent way beyond their means. My parents had taken out loans on top of emptying that emergency fund, maxing out their credit cards to pull it off. Laura and Ethan had jetted off to a luxury honeymoon, posting every picture they could, showing off the tropical beaches, fancy resorts, and all the pampering they could get. But by the time they returned, reality had already started setting in. Ethan's trust fund apparently wasn't as unlimited as he'd led everyone to believe, and he wasn't keen on giving up his lifestyle to support Laura. There were arguments about money, spending habits, even who would cover basic expenses. I guess Ethan didn't sign up to fund Laura's idea of a dream life any more than I had. It didn't take long for Laura to realize her perfect match wasn't going to foot the bill forever. About 6 months in, Laura moved back in with our parents. Turns out, Ethan had filed for divorce. The fairy tale wedding had crumbled, and Laura was back home, leaning on mom and dad for support again. They'd gone broke over this wedding, and now they had nothing to show for it. I thought that would be the end of it, but of course it wasn't. Not long after Laura moved back, my parents reached out to me again. This time it was different. They weren't angry or demanding. They were desperate. My dad called me directly, his voice shaky and strained, like he was on the edge of a breakdown. He said they were in a bit of trouble financially, that the loans from the wedding had piled up, and they were struggling to make ends meet. He asked if I could lend them some money to help them get back on their feet. The word lend made me laugh because I knew better. I'd never see that money again if I handed it over. They had no real intention of repaying me. They just assumed I'd feel guilty enough to bail them out like I'd always done. I told him no. I said that they'd made their choice when they drained the fund meant for both of us and spent it all on Laura's wedding. They'd prioritized her over and over again, and now they were dealing with the consequences. He tried to argue, saying it was different this time, that they really needed help, but I didn't budge. I reminded him of every time they'd taken from me, every sacrifice I'd made, and every empty promise they'd given. Then I hung up. About a week later, Laura tried to reach out through a mutual friend. She'd heard about my parents' financial troubles and, of course, expected me to step in. But this time, she framed it differently. She told our mutual friend she wanted to start fresh, maybe even go back to school, and was looking for a supportive sibling to help her get back on her feet. She spun it like she was giving me a chance to rebuild our relationship. I laughed when I heard it. She'd never once been supportive of me, and now she wanted me to fund her fresh start? It was the same entitlement wrapped in a new package. I told our friend to pass along the message that I wasn't interested in bankrolling Laura's life any longer. She could figure it out the way I had, on her own. I thought that was the end of it, but my parents had one last card to play. A month later, they reached out again, this time claiming it was an urgent family matter. They said they needed to talk to me in person, that it was about their retirement. I knew better, but I went anyway, figuring I'd give them one last chance to explain themselves. When we met, they told me they'd used up most of their savings on Laura's wedding and were now at risk of losing their house. They said they'd been planning to rely on me to help them during retirement since Laura had her own struggles. They framed it like it was my duty, like I owed them because they were my parents and had sacrificed so much for me. I was speechless. They'd just assumed I'd be there to cover for them after they'd put everything into Laura's wedding. They genuinely thought I'd take on the responsibility for their poor choices and let them live off my income. I told them that if they'd been as concerned about my future as they were about Laura's wedding, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I said I wasn't interested in cleaning up their mess and walked out for the last time. After that, I went completely no contact. I blocked every number, ignored every attempt they made to reach me. I heard through the grapevine that they were struggling financially, that my parents were trying to downsize but were having trouble selling their house due to debt. Laura was still living with them, doing nothing to help, and they were all barely getting by. A few relatives reached out to guilt-trip me, saying I should step up and be there for my family, but I ignored them too. None of them had been there for me when I was being used and treated like an ATM for years. I wasn't going to feel guilty now that they were finally facing the consequences of their actions. It's been a few months now, and I can't lie, it feels good to be free. I've started saving for things that actually matter to me, for the first time in years. I'm thinking of taking a vacation, maybe even buying a small place of my own. I'm finally putting myself first, and it's like a weight has been lifted. Every once in a while, I hear whispers through mutual friends or distant relatives. Apparently, my parents are still struggling, and Laura's doing nothing to help them out of the hole they dug themselves into. They're slowly realizing that all the years they spent putting Laura first left them with nothing in the end. For the first time, They're living with the consequences of their choices, and I'm no longer their fallback. It's bittersweet, knowing they could have had my support if they'd ever treated me with the respect and love I deserved. But they made their choices, and I made mine. Family is supposed to be about support, respect, and love. They showed me none of that, so I don't owe them any of it in return. I've learned that sometimes cutting people out is the only way to protect your own happiness. And I'm finally happy. And that's it. My life is no longer about cleaning up their mess, and I'm finally building something for myself. It's a new beginning, one I actually get to enjoy, without guilt or resentment hanging over me.